So I am very pleased to be live with Chris Finn. I guess you're the creator, the developer, the founder, president, all those adjectives that describe some entrepreneur of Par for Success. So if I missed one, please let us know, Chris. But happy to have you on the show. We'll have a lot of fun discussing the body and training and therapy and all these things related to golf.
For sure, Pete. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Also just like idiot who was dumb enough to start this, and then now ends up he's got to run it. That's another adjective that my wife usually uses. But no, it's a blast to be on, and excited to be here with you.
Yeah, people ask me, well, what is your official position with the show? I said, well, one day I'll be janitor, the next day I'll be CEO, next day I'll just be the host, technical advisor, lighting. Where do you want me to start? That would be my position. And I can't really go on strike because I'd be striking against myself. I mean, I had some people that help me with editing. I just send it to them, and some friends that sometime I'll let their kids do the social media. But for the most part, I like talking to people, learning new things, and so it's made it fun, and hence the name 360. I'd never want to get pigeonholed with just coaching. So it was anything that has to do with golf. And if anyone that's looked at our guest list, I mean, we've had some celebrities, coaches, trainers, doctors, club engineers, ball technicians. I mean, you name it. So it's been very fun, enlightening. I probably learned the most since I've evidently heard every episode that I've been the host on.
Yeah. Well, that's funny when I do our podcast. I joke every guest that I have on. I'm like, so selfishly, this is for me. I just happen to have a business and be kind of a fitness guy in this space too. But first and foremost, I'm an addict of a golfer. So this is, and that's what makes it so fun, I think.
Well, I mean, the whole idea for mine was, I was a big fan of Tim Ferriss, and I was got his book, The 4 Hour Work Week, read it, couldn't sleep for 3 days because my mind wouldn't stop. And then when he did his podcast, and I'm listening to it, and he has obviously a wide array of people. And I'm like thinking to myself, through the years I played professional golf and who I met on the way to that level, as well as who I met at that level, some of them extremely, extremely sharp individuals and I always tell them, I say this with utmost respect, like the nerds in the basement, meaning the geniuses that you might not ever hear of. I met a lot of people like that. And I thought, why not introduce these people to the world? Because they're so good at what they do that you can't be that great at something and be a great marketer too. Maybe a Steve Jobs, but that's a once in a generation type thing. So that was the other reason for doing it. And then it just expanded to, who am I going to get now after I kind of went through most of those people? I still have a few to get on, but it's been very educational, like just like yours, beneficial for myself as much as anybody else.
It's so funny that you started with mentioning Tim Ferriss. That was literally the first business book I read kind of out of school. I went to school for physical therapy. I was a strength coach, and I read and I said, wow, you could work 4 hours a week? Like, what is that? And so, that was the book that honestly got me going. I still have that book in my closet to this day. And I have my oldest son's 11 now. And I said, he's just reads anything and everything he can. I said, why don't you read this book? Let's see what happens.
Bouncing all over, and what the hell's wrong with this? I can't stop thinking of this. I got this idea. I'm going to try it. And yeah, I'm sure the Tim Ferriss tentacles tree, the Tim Ferriss tree, I guess I'll coin it, is probably very vast. Jason Sutton, who's top 50 coach, he right down the street at Colleton River. He's a big Tim Ferriss guy. And I talked to a number of people, open forum and at PGA show, and his reach is far and wide. He's done a tremendous service to the world in general, and everybody. I was very happy for the work that he's put out and continues to do.
I think just his success to me just kind of breaks down a lot of false beliefs that I think a lot of people have. And just using the 4 hour work week, like, wait, I thought it was 40. How do you do it in 4? Right. Mm-hmm. And I think there's been a lot of that's kind of resonated a lot throughout, Par for Success and everything I've done on the fitness side of, trying to break beliefs of, 60-year-old, 50-year-old golfers, like what's possible as you get older. And I think anybody who's trying to figure out a better way to do something resonates with that message, right? Of like, okay, I understand that, up to this point, people will say, well, that's just, if we use the fitness world, that's just what getting old is. You're just going to lose yardage and you're just going to hurt. And I think being willing to ask yourself, well, why? Like, well, wait, how do we truly know that fully? And can we do something to figure out if that's true or not? And I think that's probably a big reason, my guess would be, why Tim's reach has been so wide and across so many industries. That's certainly why it's one of the ways it's impacted me.
I think a lot of what he's done, if you followed him for any significant amount of time, or and you follow his life path or journey, he has benefited from his own show on how he has been able to change his own life from some challenging things that he's had happen to him, and I think he's the main benefactor of his own show. Whether he started out with that plan, I'm not sure, but I think, and again, I'll say this, my game and health has benefited from my own show, just from who I've had on, and I now have the ability to reach out to multiple people. I don't bug them by any means, but if I have a question on something, uh, and I was just texting Ben Shear earlier today because he's from long distance, and just through text, he's been saying, okay, have you done this? Is this going on? Is
Yeah,
this, and then, okay,
yeah, Ben's
here's what I want
awesome.
you to do.
Yeah,
So Ben's great. And I hope, Ben, if you catch this one, I know I bugged the hell out of you probably more than uh, I need to, but I can't wait for him to get his new place set up down in South Florida, make a
yeah,
trip down there. Hopefully
yeah.
it's
No,
in
he's
the off
been
season, then I can get down there and at least save money on the travel.
for sure. Yeah, no, it's fine. I think we have crossed a lot of the same paths. Ben's been a great mentor for me since the early days of my career, and he definitely will always answer that text or jump on a call.
Hmm.
He's great.
But as far as your guys' programs, at Par for Success, obviously very successful. I think you have grown to 30 plus staff members now. So obviously you wouldn't
Yeah,
be
I think
growing.
we just had our annual summit. I think there were almost 50 bodies. I think there.
Well, there you go,
It's
even
it's
more.
grown
It's
quite a
almost
bit.
double from what I was reading. But you don't get to that level without being successful. You're not successful if what you're doing isn't working. So very anxious to get in what you guys do, and and reading anyone that gets on your website or follows you guys online, which of course we'll have links to all this, to those one-click links in the summary. But there's a therapeutic side, and then there's the training side. Do you find that you guys are doing more of one or the other, or is it age specific? Is it activity specific, or are you doing more training than therapy? How does it work within your own
Yeah,
facility?
that's such a great question, Pete. Like, it's funny. I was a strength coach to start my career, and then that's how I kind of paid for. I did personal training to get my physical therapy license and all that. And when I got out and I worked for 2 years, and you work in an insurance based world, and it's very defined. There is a clear line in the sand of this is therapy, and once the pain is gone, now that is training, and we will not pay for it anymore, right? And then the
Hmm.
people end up getting discharged from therapy. So when I started Par for Success, I just that never resonated well with me. And having a strength background, it was kind of like, in my mind, from a, if you want to call it like a, strength and conditioning slash physical therapy, like a body person, there is no definitive line because
Right.
you can make arguments that doing strength training is actually preventing injury, so that could be therapeutic, and then you could make the argument that working on the quality of your breath is rehab, but that actually could improve your performance. So there was such a blurred line that when I started Par for Success, it's just me, and I said I'm not going to do insurance, and I think I started trying to say it was therapy, but then it would so quickly turn into like, all right, we're going to do some hands-on or some dry needling, but then we're going to go squat or deadlift or do medicine balls or jumps, whatever it may be. There's always kind of a bit of both, and so um, I think whether it's therapeutic or if it's performance in a way is a bit in the eye of the beholder. In reality, the physical requirements that somebody has that are required of Rory or of Scotty are no different than those that are required of 70-year-old John listening to this, right? Like if you're trying to play the game of golf, you need to rotate in the hips and in the shoulders and in the spine and in the neck. And then really it just comes down to the degree to which you need the physical attributes. So if you want to swing 120 miles an hour, well, you need more mobility, more strength, more balance than if you want to swing 90 miles an hour. And then if you throw in the caveat, I want to do either of those without hurting, well, then there's a specific threshold that's necessary. And I think that's kind of where that the crux or the genesis of Par for Success was. When I came out, I kind of looked at everything that was out there and I said, I don't really think, like, I don't believe that all of this will work. And I have a problem where if someone pays me, I kind of want to make sure that it did work. So that was kind of where the genesis of collecting the data. And back in 2013, we had V1, and you could pull up a picture of Tiger Woods, and then you could pull up a picture of 70-year-old John, like, see where Tiger is, like it just was so like asinine. So really, it just became the goal to figure out, how do I tell 70-year-old or 50-year-old, John or Joe, like, what's normal for them, what's possible for them. And so I think for some of those guys, you need more of a therapeutic approach, maybe like because their back's hurting and they can't do anything. And other guys, maybe they're not in pain, but you test them and their mobility is terrible and they're a ticking time bomb. And it's just not a matter of, when, it's just, or if, it's just a matter of when. And so I don't know how to know which one it is. I'd say whichever one, the people listening, whichever one rings true to you, call it that.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to make sure, and I'll probably reiterate numerous times throughout this, is as I have witnessed this in the golf industry, as far as in your discipline and your sector, as well as just in the training industry in general, is a lot of discussions or arguments, or well, let's call it respectful debates, that you see online or read online, usually stem from the miscommunication of something very fundamental. For example, dealing with an athlete, or well, I'll just term them athletes. So whether they're an amateur athlete as a 20 handicapper, or they're a touring professional athlete, their life depends, or their livelihood depends on it. I'll just say athletes in general. When you're dealing with an athlete who has been injured, back, knee, hip, elbow, shoulder, whatever, that is a very different scenario than somebody who's never been injured, and maybe they're just out of shape. And I think that little thing makes a huge difference as I read discussions, debates, everything. And that's just not in that's just an example of your side of the industry that I see. I mean, golf coaches, I see it. I mean, some of the stuff there I got when I had when I had John Sinclair on 2 weeks ago, who has in his database for measuring swings and ball track launch and everything, he's got more than probably TPI, might have more than anybody in the world. And I asked him, why do you think world class expert coaches can look at the exact same, not just the swing, but the data, and have two completely differing arguments? In fitness, sometimes in nutrition, God forbid, I'm not even going to go down that path.
That's a whole
Those
nother
people are that's
Pandora's
like
box.
the worst industry for arguments. But I do want to make the distinction for this episode, because there is, as I had Stu McGill on a couple months ago,
Yeah,
and
he's great.
a number of different people. What most people forget when he talks about something is he's dealing with people who are severely damaged. Like, he's the last resort. And when he says something, so, oh, you wouldn't tell someone to deadlift. He said, no, I wouldn't tell someone to deadlift in that position, in their condition. But I want to make that distinction so that nobody gets online when they hear this and says, well, Chris said this, and I read this from so and so, and he's full of shit. And no, everybody, when we talk about some things, we will identify the differences between someone who's not ever been injured and they're looking to maximize, and somebody who might be coming back from a hip replacement or knee replacement or whatever they had done. We can kind of differentiate between those two, so that everybody is happy and we don't have to hear the trolls out on social media after this.
Yeah. Well, I think it's all contextual. And I think a lot of people jump to commenting and whatnot based on their context and not the actual context of, the broader picture of what's going on and whatever the post is. And I posted, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks ago, just, some data that we had that basically, once a golfer gets to being able, speaking of deadlift, that's what cued this brought this in my mind. Once they can deadlift 1.75 times their body weight, really getting any stronger in that move is not really going to move the needle, in a meaningful way as it relates to club head speed. And there's probably other areas that would be more, better time spent, just maintain that level of strength, work on power or technique or equipment, whatever it may be. And the number of comments that came in or emails I got, they're like, I've got 3 back surgeries. I can't believe you're telling me to do this. And I'm like, well, no. I'm not telling you to do that. This is right. It's like, if you're trying to go after max speed and you're healthy and you're able to move correctly, like, you get to that point, like, then there's probably lower hanging fruit was the only point. But to your point, it's, you get these people that get like absolutely offended and like, and then they try to correct you. And then let me see. It's like, okay.
Yeah, they're looking at it through their own prism. They don't
Yeah.
understand it. You can't put every single detail in a post or a video or even
Hmm.
a long form podcast, which is one of the reasons I always did long form. One, I can't ask experts like yourself and some of the other guests I've had on to come on and talk about their life's work, whether it's been 10 years or 50 years, in 30 minutes or less. It's like by the time you get through the hellos and the pleasantries, you're at 20 minutes.
Exactly.
No, I can't do that. But even in a long form podcast like this, it's hard to give context for every single scenario. And I saw that post and I went through, I was looking at the comments this morning and I'm like, oh boy, here we go. What's your control group study and how many did you do this and how many did you do that? It's like, hey,
Well, the funny thing
give us
for
some
me is we
information.
have all that. But that's the funny thing for me is we have it all because we do it all in house. We write ups internally, and that's how we train our team. And so I can reply back like, actually, yeah, we do have it, but we actually did try. It was funny because that's always one of the comments you get when you post something like that. The why don't they always say why you need to have peer reviewed published journal or whatever. And I've done the peer reviewed, and it's the most miserable over a year long process. Like, you want to talk about how do you get great information out to the public as slow as humanly possible? Like, that is it. And then you got to pay to be IRB reviewed. I mean, it's just so silly the way that it's done. And so anyone who always asks, I'm always, yeah, I'll send it to you. I'm happy to send you the PDF. Yeah, no, it's not peer reviewed, but I can. All the information is there. You take it for as you like, but yeah, you post anything like that, you're getting at least two of those minimum.
Yeah, I would imagine. I get, what I see mostly is social media is people who get a little bit of information, and now to them it's like they've improved themselves over 100%. So now their whole perspective is that they think that they have this great amount of knowledge, which is it's 100% more than they had before. But in relationship to the rest of the world in that field, it's like, yeah, you don't know as much as you think you do. Uh,
I think the more that I've learned, the more I've learned is just, I call them parrots. Right, those are people who, and we're all guilty of it. I mean, I've been guilty of it in my career. You hear something and you're like, oh, that makes sense, and then you just all of a sudden go start telling everybody like you know it. Uh, but honestly, the deeper you get into your career and the more you truly do learn, honestly, I have yet to get to the point where what I know is bigger than or more than what I don't know. Because the more that I learn, I just learn
you
and
learn
I
more
learned that
than you
I know
realize.
two times less than what I just learned.
Yes. You're introduced like, holy shit, that's a whole ocean of information. That door just opened up. Now, all this stuff that I had, it's like that's the Aegean Sea. It's not the Pacific Ocean.
Well,
It's
that's
like,
my favorites when you spend like a year or something on a big project, you get to it, and it's happened. I've talked. You mentioned Ben or some other guys in the industry, and I'll go and I'll say, "Hey, look, we found this. Hey, have you seen something similar?" And they're like, "Yeah, like 10 years ago. Welcome." And it's like, "Oh, okay."
that's why I'm very careful in what I say. I always remember the old Mark. I think it's Mark Twain that said it. It's not what you know that gets you, or no, it's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know that ain't so. So basically, what you're 100% sure on is the thing that's going to get you in
That
trouble.
is what'll get you. Yep, live by that.
I mean, I don't usually ever comment on social media, but I think Golf Digest had one this past week on Rory on Tuesday hit 350 balls on the range, and I know that last year they were they didn't. I don't think they had the tracker yet as what guys were hitting, but they said he's hitting a lot of balls. And I made the argument. It could be wrong. I don't know. I wasn't there. That his play on the weekend got worse, and I'm like, why are you hitting so many balls? Just in my own brain, no one. I've been in around training now for almost 30 years. I've did a 7 to 10 year study in neurological system and putting. I know enough about that stuff to at least speak intelligently. And I'm like, why is he doing that? Isn't the idea to do your preparation before the tournament and take your relax at the tournament because you're going to burn a lot of energy. I mean, I never played in a major, played in some fairly big tournaments, did well in some, but the amount of energy expenditure that you go through, unknown to you at the time, is off the charts. And Tiger has spoken of this for years. Anyway, long story short, some guys on there, one in particular, is like, "What do you know? You're just a podcaster." That was his first comment. And then as the responses kept going down, he said, "What? You're just a washed up golfer. You don't know. You didn't win a major, so you're just mad." And it's like going on and on and on. I'm like, dude, the human body. I know Bryson is trying to do some things that are outside the norm of what people do, but you're talking about Jack and Tiger and Phil and Nick Faldo. I mean, you got decades of pros who did their preparation in advance and they take their time early in the week because they know how hard it's going to be. And it's like, oh, you just don't know. You're just mad. You're just an angry keyboard warrior. Okay, whatever, dude.
I
So
love
yeah,
those guys.
I try to refrain from posting. Just Andrew Rice told me that years ago, and sometimes I make the mistake and make one post, but I thought it was pretty neutral. Uh, but so be it. But one thing I want to get in with the, and I want to come back to the deadlift thing because I might as well go there, and we'll come back to this other
Yeah,
stuff.
let's do it.
As you mentioned, in healthy individuals, golfers, athletes, deadlifts are pretty good. And I see the benefit. You know, Rory's doing them, or he has done, or some form like a hack squat. I don't know, and I think he's still doing deadlifts. Masters had part of his workout, I think, or his own page has part of it. And for someone like yourself who has such a database, how do you differentiate between when you're getting to a threshold that you think a golfer might be going a little too far and they need to back off, or when the risk reward of a deadlift or even a squat, as those two seem to be the biggest taboos around the back in particular? When do you have markers, or when do you see, or when do you advise the people you're working with? All right, we can push it for right now, or we need to back off because either you have too much weight and your concentric movement is too slow, or is there something else?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question. It's a loaded question. I think whenever and no good question is not a loaded question, so I love it. I think ultimately, if we're talking like a deadlift or a squat, right? Because to your point, those I think get the two worst raps when it comes to injuries. I think the first asterisk is no one ever asks to see the rep that the injury happened on or the first step before. Usually the technique is no good. Usually it sucks. There's some bad, poor movement or some other pre-existing thing that's going on. But I think the first thing that you're always looking at is, can the person perform the movement without load, right? So like if we use deadlift, can the person bend over, touch their toes with their legs straight with a good hinge pattern, right? Where are they just like arching at the thoracic spine or the part of the spine between your shoulder blades? And so I think the first thing is, do they have good quality of movement without any load? And then, if we're talking Rory deadlifting during the Masters, well, what people aren't talking about would be all of the movement quality training, whatever that he did for the last 20 years to get to the point where, he may be lifting, let's say 315. So maybe he's got 6 wheels on, but what you may not be saying is that his max may be 400. So he may be lifting a 70%, like just to keep the nervous system firing. Right.
Yeah.
So to your point of, we were talking about earlier, people just may not have all the context, but I think when you're looking at anybody, the people listening, number one, you got to have good mobility without load. Number two, you're going to make sure you can have good form, good technique with load. And then, ultimately what we have found is that once you get to a strength level of being able to deadlift 1.75 times your body weight, squat 1.5 times your body weight, and bench press 1.25 times your body weight. So if you weigh 100 pounds, you could bench 125, you could squat 150, and you could deadlift 175. Once you get to those numbers, this is with our database, what we've looked at is what's called causational changes, right? So if somebody's at those numbers and they increase and get stronger so they can lift more weight, you don't necessarily see an increase in club head speed. But if instead you go and you work on your elasticity, so if you look at a guy like Akshay or Zalatoris was a good example, like it's kind of super skinny guys. Ryan Gerard is a guy that we work with who's very elastic. Right, these kind of younger, early 20 guys you see in kids. Justin Thomas is somebody who's maintained his elasticity as he's gotten older. Those are guys who are very elastic, and so they would typically end up like lifting heavier would actually decrease their risk of injury. So I use the analogy that strength is like armor. It's like body armor. Like if you're going into battle, if you go in with a t-shirt, like you ain't going to last long. If you go in an armored tank, you're going to last a little longer, right? And so hitting those numbers basically gives you an armor tank. Doesn't mean you can't get hit, but you can take a lot more hits before you be dead.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's where you see like a guy like Zalatoris, and particularly these guys, when they get to their mid 20s, they have a lot of side bend or a lot of spinal side flex, and the spine kind of starts to like set in mid, 20, mid-20s, and kind of, you don't have as much movement necessarily. And that's where a lot of those guys start to run into issues of that length. So as you can see, the guys who tend to get stronger will tend to be able to generate more power with less injury. That's why Bryson put on so much load, or so much mass. Even though he put on wasn't all healthy mass, and
Yeah, he
that's
had
a
to
whole
back
different
off.
discussion. He had to back off because he went too far, right? And that's the point of that post. You go to deadlifting 2.5x or whatever, like you start adding a lot of load and adding a lot of weight. There is a point of where it actually, there's a point of diminishing return, but you're still kind of getting some return, and then there's a point where it falls off, because then you're creating so much force, but you're doing so at such a detriment to you. You're doing it slower, right? It's a simple math equation. It's like force times speed equals, so like how strong you are and how fast you move equals, let's say, club head speed. So if you're like a 1 on the strength, or say you're 2 on the strength and you're a 2 on the speed, 2 times 2 would be your club head speed could be 4, right? Bryson basically went to like a 5 on the strength and then like a 0.2 on the speed. Mm-hmm. Right? Or so there can be these are obviously made up numbers just to paint a picture of, there can be an imbalance where you get too strong to a point where it actually diminishes your speed or your ability to move fast. And so there's an ideal zone for everybody. We've even tested with like velocity based training, where you just go based on how fast people move in a deadlift or a squat. Yep. And really what we found again is, like, until you get to those numbers, like velocity based training really not worth the juice isn't worth the squeeze when it comes to creating club head speed. But once you get to those numbers, if you still want to, like, that may be the change in your training, where you stop going for load. Now you train for velocity, right? So that's at those numbers, that's where you start to get to the nuance of the training. But in all honesty, Pete, like any amateur golfer over the age of 40, I've yet to meet one who came in who had perfect rotary mobility and who hit all of those strength numbers, where I was like, oh, right, yeah, we get to do like the real nerdy stuff. like statistically, if you're over the age of 50 and a male, 90% of you listening are going to fail one of the 4 main rotational centers that you need, right? That immediately puts you at a higher injury risk. It also decreases your potential for speed. And then, same thing, 90 plus, I'd say like 98% of guys over 50 are not hitting those strength numbers. So there's so many other low hanging fruit areas that, that post was about the deadlift or the squat. Like, those are like ideal numbers. Those are, if you could ever get to those, like, just maintain, you're good. But certainly not meant as like every golfer should be able to do that.
Yeah, because at some point you're only working on strength and forcing. The speed column is starting to sacrifice because the strength column is going up. I would have to imagine if the musculature is getting too bulky, we'll use that as a very generic term so that everybody can understand, that the amount of speed that it can produce force, but it's not going to be able to produce it very quickly. And there's going to be a threshold there where you're getting, you don't want to become bodybuilder size. And the guys you brought out, the Akshays, Joaquin Neiman, JT, those guys are working out, but as you said, elastic, I think, was a great term. You have elastic golfers, and then you have the muscular force golfers like a Bryson or a Brooks, John Rahm. And it looks like to me from the 20,000 foot view that if you train one way and the other one, if you flip their training, it could be detrimental to that person's physical structure as far as the way that they're built. They have more or less density, but you wouldn't have JT doing 350-pound deadlifts. It just doesn't seem like it would add up, or it would make him bulkier.
Well, I think there's a couple things to unpack there. I think number one, the golfer who thinks I don't want to get too bulky,
yeah, they never
is also the one who says I'm not going to spend 2 hours in the gym and do all that volume in order the requirement to get bulky, nor am I willing to eat 5,000 clean calories a day to have the surplus
That's
to put on.
Like
people don't realize how hard it is to gain healthy bulk. that's one, right? So this is the other funny thing too. It's like you hear of golfers, I don't want to get bulky, and it's like you realize, like, it's not that you like go to the gym today and you wake up tomorrow and you're like massive, like you're Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like you understand, like if that even were to occur, which the likelihood that it would occur is very low. Like there would be a point where we'd be like, hey, I think we're actually seeing something. Maybe we should just tailor. Like it wouldn't be life ending. Like it'd be something very easy to taper back. The second thing I think with JT, if we use him as an example, does JT need to deadlift 350 pounds? No, he doesn't
He already hits
weigh
a
enough
300
to
plus.
justify it.
Yeah.
Right. But the one thing with him is, particularly if we're talking about longevity for these guys, which is a very big discussion that will start, it's already, you're starting to hear it a little bit, because by the time they make the tour, they've already basically played the equivalent of competitive rounds and traveled in junior golf to what the Arnold Palmers would have played professionally in their career,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're doing it at speeds that are significantly faster. So when you talk about a guy like JT and you talk longevity, what the other thing that happens in the body as you get older is your natural elasticity decreases. So if you think about it as I always think of it as like a continuum, or like a, remember from grade school, like a number line, left to right, right? We say the left side of the number line is very elastic and the right side is very strong. So think of a Justin Thomas versus a Brooks Koepka, right? Um, the JTs in the world, as they get older, naturally are going to lose a bit. They're going to naturally move farther down that number line to the right because they're going to lose elasticity. If they don't then replace that with strength, and that doesn't necessarily mean bulk, it just means that, to your point of the nervous system, that they can generate maximal force to make up for that loss of elasticity. Like strength training actually becomes more important for those people as they get older, to basically make up or mitigate any losses that they would have in the elasticity side. The guys like a Brooks, who are naturally more what we would call like a strength speed, so they're on more the right side of that line. As they get older, they also are going to lose elasticity. So they're also going to need to they're going to need to do more probably elastic training to kind of try to keep as much of that as possible, because but their natural superpower is still the strength side. And the JTs in the world, their natural superpower, quote unquote, is the elasticity side. So they're all going to have elements of it in their training. It's just a matter of how much of it they have. We have a kid. I say guy because he's like a young man. He's a man mentally. He's a freshman at Carolina, and he, from the time he was 16, was hitting all those strength numbers in his lower body. He's got tree trunks. His elasticity numbers are terrible. So he's one of the only like 15-year-olds that we were doing plyometrics like extremely heavily as if he was like a 30-year-old golf professional,
Mm.
because he was good enough on the strength, but really so we just need to maintain that because we knew kind of where the top end of return was. But his biggest fruit on the lower body was going to come from more of the speed side. So he was kind of more like a Brooks end of the equation there. Now his upper body, he's like a JT. So you gotta get him stronger on the upper body, right? And I think that's where every person's different. I think that's the importance of, for everyone listening. Don't just say, "Oh, I'm like JT," or "I'm like Brooks," or "I'm built like Rom," or whoever it may be. You're gonna have nuances that you don't even know about, that they like most people don't realize. Like John Rahm had a club foot.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he swings like differently. Most people don't realize why golfers swing the way that they do. And so then their bodies have to be built to support that. So I think that's an important element of, number one, you don't just wake up bulky overnight. That's a ridiculous fear, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're not
For
going to go from a 42 to a 50-inch sport coat just because in 3 months, just because you started lifting weights.
right, not because of workouts you're doing in the gym, maybe because of what you're eating at night, or or drinking at night, right? That's possible, but not because you're doing the right stuff in the gym and eating clean. And I mean, I would challenge anybody who's worried about that: go eat 5,000 calories in one day of chicken and rice and vegetables.
Yeah, you
Like,
can't do it.
it's so hard.
You get to lunch and you say, "That's it, I'm done. I'm not eating
Yeah,
again."
yeah, 100%. So, but yeah, no, I think that's an important distinction. And then I do think what you're going to see with these guys is their training is going to change. It has to change as they get older, because their bodies are changing, their physical needs are changing. If the technology of the ball and the clubs, as there's different regulations that come into play with those things, their training will change, all of that. So it's no
When
different. I think that's the cool thing for them. Is for the amateurs, it's the same. That's, I think, one of the coolest things about golf.
when somebody sees JT, he does the helicopter drill where he's on one leg, he's leaned over, he's got the band stretch, and he's twisting. The amount of, and I want to kind of illustrate it and for the listener, if they can picture in their own head. And I think that there's plenty of him across social media that people could find. Is that I think it's the airplane drill is what it's called, because you're standing on one leg, your rear leg is up in the air, you're tilted over, not maybe quite parallel to the ground, arms are extended, and you're twisting for your hip mobility, and I'm imagining it's developing some strength. He does it without wobbling at all. And I watch this and I'm like, okay, I can do that. Now I go to do it and I get about halfway and I start stumbling. Now I've got, from so many years of playing basketball, I think I ripped up my ankles 6, 7 times each, like bad, severe sprain. So I have about zero stability in my ankle to support myself. But so he's able to do that now. And I would have to assume at his age that's enough for what strength is. Cause I want to get the listener to understand the differentiation between strength. When somebody hears strength, they might think, like you said, like an Arnold Schwarzenegger or a Ronnie Coleman, Dmitry Klokov, that they're going to be big. As you said, they think they're going to have to go, they're going to get all bulked up. But strength comes in many different shapes and forms.
Yeah, and I think,
can you elaborate on that a little bit? Or
yeah, it's a great.
Give your description.
Yeah, so strength by definition is how much force you can produce. So a strength exercise by definition is an exercise that challenges you to, it overloads the tissue and forces you to get truly stronger. Now you can, how big you get, a lot has to do is controlled by nutrition, right? A lot of it's nervous system. So like Steph Curry, most people would not consider Steph Curry a massive guy, right? He deadlifts over 400 pounds. Like he's crazy strong, right? But you would never think that he's got a 400-pound plus deadlift, right? The exercise you're describing with JT, I think a lot of people on social call it strength training. It's actually balance and pattern training, right? So maybe it's ingraining, the ability for his foot to be connected and him to disassociate, which means to separate one part of the body from the other. So the hip from the torso, from the arms. And so that's, some people will say, oh, that's a strength exercise. He doesn't actually have any load on him. So there's not, by definition, he's not overloading. Now, if he puts some overload on it, then it would become he's strengthening in that particular movement pattern. So in that sort of an exercise, naturally, there's obviously requires a lot of balance. That gets harder as you get older. So, that's going to be a much more challenging exercise for a Bernhard Langer than probably a JT, especially since Bernhard tore his Achilles, right? He's got other issues going on. So, I think there's a lot of power, speed, strength. People throw these terms around online, and it's actually a lot of the times used broadly and incorrectly. So if you're seeing someone move weight, that like a lot of like strength training is like, if you can do 8 reps and you got maybe 2 left in the tank. So anything less than 8 reps to the point where you only have 2 or less left in the tank, that's strength training. You're trying to get the nervous system really, really strong, and you can get really strong without actually adding tons and tons of mass. And it's just controlled by how much you eat. You can get stronger and actually lose weight. Or you can get stronger and add 50 pounds, right? No. And that's what Bryson did, obviously, but there obviously was his body fat percentage went up.
Yeah, and he started having trouble almost shitting himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Slugging back 6 protein shakes a day plus 3 or 4 meals.
That's
some point he's going to say no.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah. So I think when you see an exercise like what JT is doing, again, you got to put it into the full context of what is the goal of that exercise. I think that's the one thing. Nobody asks the question. Everyone will comment. Nobody asks. And I think that's the one thing I always try to do. And in those situations is you mentioned it here. Like, I'm always trying to go with curiosity. And if even if the post says, hey, we're strengthening XYZ, and you look at it and it's like, well, that's not a strength exercise. My question is, well, why is he doing it? I wonder what he's trying to work on, what I'm trying to learn. And that is a great mentality for everybody listening. Whenever you see something like that, don't just go do it. Instead of putting a comment like, that's awesome, or that's stupid, or like say, hey, what's the goal of this exercise? What are you guys working on? Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, he literally could be doing that because maybe he strained his big toe flexor and it's inhibited, and they're trying to get him to feel his big toe grabbing the ground more. Like, it could be something as simple as that. But it's actually a game that we've joked about it at our facility is like, what are some of the most ridiculous exercises we could put on and make people believe that like it's this, like how far could you go before people would actually call BS on you? Um, the hypothesis is pretty far.
Well, some of the, and I used to think they were almost outliers, but some of the longest and players I've seen, even at the tour level, have been sleight of build. I'm 6'5", 235, so I'm a lot of those guys are sleight of build to me, even when I played. You got JT's is long for Jacqueline Neiman's long, Akshay's long. The one kid he has led the tour, I think, in driving for many years. Sean Foley's student, as a young kid. He's won twice, 2 or 3 times. I cannot think of his name. I can see his swing because he's got so much lag. A
Wolf?
seven and a, no, Matt Wolf's long too. Uh, what's the kid? Yeah, I think he won in Mississippi or Alabama a couple years ago. I'm sure I'll think of it in a minute, but he's like 6'1", 180. Jamie Sadlowski, it was more or less my era. Jamie's won the worlds at a comparatively to the rest of the guys. A very good friend of mine at the Super Seniors, the one year at the Worlds, he beat Jamie by like 0.1 yards on pound for pound as being the longest in the world. I think Mike was 160 and hit 379. Um, and then I look at guys like Martin Borgmeyer and Jason Zuback, and when Jason was doing long drive, and Jason's been on, and great talking to him about these things. But you see the spectrum that you see big strong guys, and then you see what's comparatively slight of build guys, and you're like, these guys have got like this superpower. But they got they got strength, they got flexibility, they got mobility, they got the entire package.
Yeah, so we actually train pretty much all the top 10 world long drive guys. So all of them were in North Carolina. They all train down at the coach at the One Stop Power Shop, Bobby Peterson, which is about an hour from us. Actually, was down there this morning. And so we've tested all, pretty much all, like Colton Casto is the world number one right now, Kyle Berkshire, all of them, Jack Smith. And it's interesting because yes, they all hit it. They all swing the club really fast. They all hit the ball really far. They all do it different. They all have different physical kind of packages in terms of, Jack Smith is 5'10", like he's not a big guy. Right. Colton, he's 6'1", he's about my height. He's not huge. Kyle's not massive. He's 6'2". But like Kyle is joint for joint the most flexible player we've ever tested. If you have better shoulder external rotation than him, you will not have better hip internal rotation. If you beat him in those two, you will not beat his trunk rotation, right? So
his DNA, you can't.
He's just he's a freak.
Yes.
He's a freak, and he works hard at it, and he's maniacal of what he goes after, and so I think when you're talking about when I talk about speed for the amateur, I think I always think of a pizza pie, and I think if there's 4 main slices. I think the top 2 slices are, your equipment obviously is a big part of generating speed. And then I would lump into kind of like technical, right? So your technique, your mental, your intent, that sort of stuff. The bottom half is physical. So, and I would break that into your mobility. There's 4 mobility centers that actually matter. There's your shoulder external rotation, which is think of your ability to think of like a pitcher throwing a baseball, right? Their arm cocks backwards. That's extremely important on your trail arm. So right side for a right-handed player, left side for a left-handed player. Your lead arm is important in that motion. So your trail side is going to be more important for path playing, efficiency issues. Your left side, what we found through all of our data is there's a direct correlation between the more mobility you have on your lead side, the more speed you can create. So there's definitely a speed unlock there. Then you have your hip rotation, so internal rotation, which is your ability to rotate into your trail side and then into your lead side, so through impact. If you're limited there, obviously that's going to limit your ability for your hip, a good weight shift, hips moving first, X factor stretch. There's going to be, and then it's also the number one predictor of of having back issues, which, a lot of those guys have. Is if you fail the test on the lead side, the likelihood that you have problems is going to have back pain is extremely high. Then you have your thoracic spine. So that's, if you have your hands crossed on your shoulders, sitting in a chair and you turn as far as you can left and right. And if you watch the Sunday broadcast, they always call it shoulder turn. It's actually thoracic mobility. And then the fourth one is the neck rotation. So obviously, if you don't have good neck rotation when you make a big turn in your backswing, going to be tough to see the golf ball. So, right. So, that's that third kind of piece of the pie is what are your mobility numbers there? And what we found is there's a direct relationship to how fast you want to swing to you needing more mobility. And we actually can, people can, we have it free on our site. People can basically figure out how do they compare to other golfers their age. Going back to what I talked about in the beginning, like if you're 55 years old and you want to know like what's good for me, you can see, hey, what's the 10th percentile, the bottom 10% of your age look like? And hey, what do the top 10% look like? And where are you? That's been probably one of the coolest things for me to give to guys is like, I don't have to compare you to Tiger or to Rory or to Akshay, right?
Yeah.
We can compare you to you. So that's that third piece is the mobility element. So you're trying to optimize that. And I can tell you, like, the reason why a lot of long drive guys don't have long careers is because they all suck at that. They're all really good at the strength side, and they all are terrible at the mobility side. They're all like
Is
60-year-old
it
men.
more in the hips that their mobility gets
All of them.
restricted?
It sucks everywhere because, and so part of the issue, Pete, too, is the way that those guys train to swing as fast as possible. Honestly, isn't like overspeed, underspeed training, because without hitting a golf ball, they swing so fast, it actually hurts their wrists because they don't have the decel, hitting the actual ball. So they actually train hitting balls, and they'll hit 50, 100. They'll hit 150 balls in a speed session, trying to go. And so the wear and tear that puts on the body is you're going to create, basically trigger pointing that will lock the joints down a little bit, right? And you do that over and over and over and over again. And if you don't take care of the tissue, which most of them don't realize they need to do it, then it locks down and it causes issues. That's how Kyle had the partial oblique tear. His trail shoulder caused the right side oblique tear because he was over pull. It was a wild kind of contingency. But then that fourth quadrant is in the strength and the power element, right? So the strength we've talked a little bit about already today is how much force can you produce, or like how much weight can you move, basically. And the big four moves that really matter are a push, like a chest press or bench press, a pull, it's like a lat pull, a squat, and a hinge, right? So those are the big four movements that we look at and say, how strong are you? And then there's power. So we look at a vertical leap. So how high can you jump? If you're doing it at home, we have people use sticky notes. If you come into our facility, we do it on force plates and get really accurate. And then a seated chest pass. So with a medicine ball, doing a chest pass forward. And those are when we look at, we used to do like a shot put throw too. And all the shot put, the vertical leap, and the chest pass all had high, statistically speaking, correlation to club head speed. So meaning if those numbers were high, typically their club head speed was high. But what we found is as we trained people and over, 3 months, 12 months, 24 months, as we saw those tests change, what we found was if their shot put got better, but their chest pass or vertical did not, their club head speed didn't move. If their chest pass got better and nothing else moved, their club head speed got better. If their vertical got better and nothing else moved, their club head speed got better. So it was interesting in that while the shot put had a correlation, it did not cause, or the statistical term is there was no causational relationship to club head speed. So we actually dropped that test. So it's less tests people have to do. But that's where those tests on the power side now tell you, like, for instance, in the chest pass, we have people throw a 4-pound ball, an 8-pound ball, and a 12-pound ball. And so like a Zalatoris is going to throw that 4-pound ball proportionally farther than a Brooks, probably, right? But Brooks is going to throw the 12-pound ball farther proportionally than a Zalatoris. So you start to get these profiles of speed, and every golfer has this, where particularly your 50 plus guys, they will tend to be strength oriented. They'll create their speed from their strength, so they'll do decently on the heavy ball, but they'll suck on the small ball. And it's funny watching. You're like, they're like, wait, I could throw it farther, and they just truly cannot move faster. It's funny. It's so frustrating for them. But that gives you with literally those 6 physical tests, the 4 mobility tests, and then the power test. And obviously you look at the strength too, but it gives you so much insight where you can, we call it our safe swing speed calculator. We can say, hey, based on your mobility numbers, your age, And based on your power numbers, this is the speed that you should be able to swing, like with pretty, not 100%, but pretty high certainty that you're probably not going to get hurt. And unfortunately, what we see, because there's 4 pieces to the pie, particularly good golfers, they will actually swing faster than what their body can handle because they have the right equipment optimized and they're technically optimized, but their body is actually not able to keep up with what they're doing. And that's why, over 50% of golfers have back pain and all these other injuries that occur as guys get older.
When you get somebody, let's say like a Koepka, who, when you did the Zalatoris Koepka comparison, and usually the smaller, faster, more elastic guy will throw the lighter one farther, and vice versa. Do you then cater or does, when you design their program, do you design it so that those uh, focus on where they're most efficient, or do you continue on what their strengths are and then fill in with what they're deficient in? How do you decide what part to focus on?
Yeah, I think I use an analogy of if Superman came in, he would win every single test except if I gave him kryptonite.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, if I say, hey, stop doing everything else you're great at, and we're just going to try to get you better at handling kryptonite, he's going to get worse then he becomes average across. Like maybe we get his kryptonite level higher, but he's going to become average everywhere, right? And then all of a sudden, Superman's not on tour anymore. So I think the number one rule with training is, and amateurs will have this too, you'll have this part of your game that is your strength that makes you like who you are. I think the key is you can't let that go. And in a program, let's say you're very strong. Let's say you test and you're like a Brooks guy, right? So you throw the heavy ball really far, but your mobility stinks and you don't move the light ball fast. This is most guys listening right now, right? I call you the proverbial gorilla locked in a cage,
Well, yeah,
right?
because not to cut you off, but most guys that this is going to fit is they were decent athletes in high school. They go to college, they get in the workforce. Maybe they play some activity. Maybe they play in a golf league so they're playing 3 days a week. Then they get married and have kids. Now they're not playing all. They're working because they have financial responsibility, and now they need to do something. So maybe they go back to the gym and they start lifting heavy again, or
Yeah,
some
they do the
type.
mirror muscles, all the muscles in
Yes,
the front. Yeah,
and they didn't realize sitting at a desk for the last 20 years, their mobility and flexibility went into the tank.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it makes perfect sense.
yeah. So for those guys, like you don't want to tell that guy, hey, stop lifting and spend all your time on just mobility because now you're taking away his superpower. What you want to do is you want to say, hey, let's just do the minimum we need to do to maintain where your strength's at. And let's take any time we can get back, particularly if they're still working or whatever. And they're like, hey, I go to the gym for 30 minutes a day. Like, cool. Well, let's see if we can take maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes of that workout and just maintain your strength. And let's take the other 20 and let's work on bringing back, like unlocking the cage. Like, let's get your mobility improved. Like, let's do the other stuff, but let's not lose where you're at on your strength. And then when we can get those lower levels up to a level that's acceptable for where you want to be. Now, if you want to swing 120 miles an hour, mobility's got to go a lot higher, right? Like, so I'll use the hips, for example. We want to see 45 plus degrees. But if you just are cool swinging 90 miles an hour, like you're probably okay 35 to 40. But the goal is that when you then unlock them, quote unquote, with the lower body, that they still have that power, and all of a sudden they can just use it, right? And it just kind of comes out. And so I do think it's like the kid who makes it through Q school and then switches like all of a sudden switches from Titleist to Mizzou, whatever, and then all of a sudden they never play well again until they go back, right? I think you can see a similar thing sometimes on the fitness side where people come in and they like crush one of the tests and then they're like, oh, okay, that's fine. I'm just going to do everything else. Mm-hmm. And then, unfortunately, I think that's a lot of things I see wrong when the general fitness of amateurs that's kind of promoted in a lot of places for golfers is, oh, it's all about mobility. It's all about bands. And like, yeah, but if you have somebody who can already, move their body weight or more than their body weight, like keep that. It's important. That's going to be extremely valuable.
Yeah, you don't want to lose it.
Yeah. But like, yes, let's unlock this other stuff. But there's this element. Let's keep your armor as thick as possible because that's ultimately at the end of the day what's going to extend your golf life when you can pair that with mobility in the right areas.
How do you deal with, because it's like not that he's a golfer. I think he's worked with some long drive guys, but like a Ben Patrick who's brought forth the notion of full range of motion, and he's obviously very popular. And I'm sure a number of golfers out there know what I'm talking about. And if they haven't, they're probably hitting pause and they're going to pull up Ben Patrick, knees over toes guy. But the full range of motion, it doesn't seem like if somebody's going to start working on their development of their chest and they're going to do bench presses, whether it's with a barbell or dumbbells, however they're going to do it, that they're going to sit there and say, I'm going to do full range of motion where the dumbbell or the bar comes all the way down to my chest as low as possible. I'm going to push it up. Now I want to get to doing 250 or 300. But where is the risk reward there with the shoulder capsule where you don't really need that full range of motion? Like if you want to develop a big chest and be on stage, yeah, I can see why you want to do full range of motion chest. But if you want to hit a golf ball and increase your swing speed up to 105 miles an hour, why are you risking your shoulder integrity to do that? So is there? Do you guys have data? I know you got over 15,000. I'm sure you got to have something on full range of motion versus partial range of motion as far as golf training is concerned.
Yeah, the way I would answer that, Pete, would be encourage everyone listening to approach it with common sense, right? So, I think, if you go all the bar down, we'll use that example. There's a couple others like I'll lay out for people too that hopefully one of them will resonate with you guys. If you go, let's bench press bar to the chest. In order to do that, your elbows are going to have to go back below your spine. So if you think of like a floor press is the safest version of a chest press, where you're literally laying on the floor and your triceps, your elbow they can't go below the floor, right? If you go below there, right, and you say you got to touch your chest, to the bar. Well, what happens is then your elbow gets below the front side of your capsule gets stressed, and there's a chance of shoulder injury. The number one rule in the gym for any golfer should be make sure I can do no harm so that I can still play in an hour, right? And so the full range of motion, I would say you want, and this is, you're training, if we're talking golf fitness, you're training for golf. So what ranges of motion are required for the game of golf? And let's be good in those ranges of motion. Mm-hmm. I've yet to see where getting my hands behind my chest come into the golf swing. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. With like a lot of load and force trying to push forward. The other one would be the one that kills me is guys saying like, come in and be like, oh, I'm super flexible. I'm like, cool. I'm like, how do you know that? They're like, oh, I could touch my toes. I'm like, cool. So when do you ever keep your knees straight and bend over and touch your toes on the golf course? And they kind of like pause. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like, when you take your golf stance, like, can you show me your golf stance? And so they get in their golf stance. I'm like, all right, cool. Now touch your hands to your thighs. All right, cool. Can you get to your knees so you can get 8 inches past where you need to go? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, cool. Then you're good. Yeah. If you want to put your socks on in the morning, yeah, maybe like touching your, and I think that's where a lot of people miss, where they're like, yes, bending over, touching your toes, having a good hinge pattern. That's important to be able to deadlift safely. Mm-hmm. Now, if you can't bend over and touch your toes, and you still want to deadlift, well, then we probably need to raise the bar up off the ground onto lifts, or we need to pick a different, way to maybe it's a barbell hip thrust or something. Maybe we're training your hinge pattern in a different way that's safe for you. And I think that's an important piece for everyone to hear is like, there's lots of different ways to skin the cat and get strong in these patterns, that it's just a matter of what is safe for you. And so, so the knees over toes, full range of motion, I would say full range of motion as required for the game of golf is the full range of motion that I would require. Knees over toes and doing those squat, like if that's what you're into and you want to go ass to God, like if that's what you're into, by all means go ahead. It's not going to make your golf swing any better. I think to your point, you're always weighing risk and reward, and when you do that,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, yeah, go ahead.
Alex Ehlert, Dr. Ehlert,
Alex well.
Yeah, he's doing a lot of work and testing with the flywheel, and then he was the first one that brought up that he's shown that golfers maybe 45 degrees on their knee positioning on their squat is plenty, because even on a heavy download, for some of the best players in the world, they're not going below 45 degrees angle. I don't even think they're getting to 45 before they're going and exploding upwards. Maybe the long drive guys, you would know more with the training that, as you mentioned, those guys being so close. But he goes, well, why would anyone go below 45 degrees? One, it's going to give you knee irritation or cause trouble with your knees. If you don't have the dorsiflexion in your ankles, which most people 40 years old or older are not going to have, If you're 20, yeah, you want to try it, go ahead, knock yourself out. But if you're 40 and older, maybe try keeping it short of 45 and then going from there.
All about, for me, it's all about what's the least amount I can do with a play. Like, what is the least? It's funny. My mom used to always give me a hard time in school. She's like, you just seem to be happy with like the 90. She goes, if you spent all the time, I played basketball. She's like, if you spent all the time that you spent on the basketball, if you just spent like, it took an hour out of that and studied more, you could have like, A pluses and everything. I'm like, yeah, but 90 is good enough to get me to wherever I want to go. Like, and I want to go play basketball. Right. And that has stayed with, she gives me a hard time now because now she's like, and now you do that with all your players. And I'm like, well, yeah, if, if they don't need, if they only need to go here, why am I going to make them go farther? Like, I'm gonna make you go as far as you need to go to get the biggest return. We go back to the deadlift, the 1.75x, if it's appropriate for you. But once you hit that, I'm not pushing you to 2. There's no point, unless you have some big ego about it, or And so the squatting, going beyond hack squat, or that kind of half squat 45 degrees, like, if you want to go and you're a fitness nut, like, by all means you can go ahead, but do you need to go? And if you have a limitation in dorsiflexion, you have all these other things, what am I really losing by only having you go halfway? Well, if the answer is not much and I reduce risk, well, then that's a win. And I think that's how all pros should be trained, and that's how all amateurs should train.
When you're working with some of these, whether it's long drive guys, we'll just make the distinction between Division One and higher, so all the way up to professional, and then we'll get into amateur golf and more or less beginner as a follow up. But the one question I have is, when you're, because I was guilty of this when I was playing, and I have students now that I understand now how to better coach them through this, whether it's in their swing or when they're in the gym. How do you get somebody who is extremely high driven? They're a certain caliber of person who they wouldn't achieve what they had to date. How do you get them to understand that, to say you do not have to go past 1.7 on your deadlift. You don't have to go past 1.25. But as you said, if they can do 300, they're going to want to do 325. I mean, do you sit down and basically say, you're going to get to a point, number one, it's not helping you. So if you don't believe me at that, because you've probably have done things that people have told you couldn't before, that's how you got here. But do you say, finally have to get to them to say, here's your dream, play the PGA Tour, the LPGA Tour, the world-class golf. If you keep going down this path, you run a very high risk of hurting yourself. And now you're not going to play at all. I mean, do you have to get to that level, to that extreme, to where you put it in front of them? Say, we don't want you to hurt yourself. Do no harm, as you said, was the number one rule.
Every week.
Yeah, hey, it makes sense.
And sometimes multiple times. But I think what has always helped myself and my team to have those conversations with those players is we have the data. And I think it always starts out initially, we're like, all right, cool, you've hit this goal. And then what I do is then I'll try to show them where their bigger deficit is. And it's like, all right, we're going to maintain here, and now we're going to try to bring this goal up, right? And if we do that, I think that's the cool thing, is we can say, hey, if we can improve your chest pass by X amount of inches, that's going to equate to X amount of miles per hour. So we're going to do everything we need to do here. And because you're a strong guy, we're going to work on the speed side of it. So we're going to focus here. And our goal is, when we retest in 8 weeks or 12 weeks, whenever it is to see this, this test go up by this much. And then we want to see that obviously translate over into the club head speed side of things, or whatever the performance metric is. So I think step one is always explaining to the individual, hey, like, you're here, our biggest ROI is if we address this, and look how much more we can get. So it's always, I always, I forget where it's a proverb, I forget where it's from, but it's like, you can only see the mountain in front of you until you get over that mountain, and then you realize there's another mountain.
Yeah,
right.
I tell people they got a mountain to climb,
Exactly.
or there's another one waiting.
Exactly. And I think that's how you got to treat players, right? Is they're only going to be focused on that mountain. So if I give them that mountain, then all of a sudden they climb it. Now it's my responsibility to now give them the next mountain. Because if I don't, they're going to just want to make the mountain they're on higher. It's like, no, you're good. Let's go to the next one.
And from what I see, as far as their game is concerned, and that's the second part of the question. So if we go to the not as accomplished golfer, or not, we'll say physically fit in your area, and we'll say not as accomplished in mine. So relative beginner all the way up to, say, a single digit. And the two things with them is, you could divide that group into two, is one is getting them to to get through the soreness and the difficulty of doing something new. So with you, it's they're going to be sore, they're going to be tired, they're not going to want to come back to the gym. With me, it's they're not going to want to do the drills or whatever I prescribe for their swing. But so that's one half. How do you deal with that? And then the second part of that question is how do you deal with the person who's been in that in golf, or let's say they're swinging, they're training, they have some experience because they've done it for 5 or 7 years, they're just not to a level they need to be, and then they do get addicted. Is it then the same that you do with the high level players? You got to, here's the next mountain, here's the next goal, we're going to hold this where we are and we're going to grow this. So two parts of that question.
Yeah, I think for the first part of the question, for the newbie who's like never done anything, never done it before, I think the key is I'm a big fan of kind of like the snowball effect of like lots of little wins, and then just and have a snowball effect to where, I say, hey, what are you willing to do? Right. And they say, oh, I'm willing to do, 3 workouts a week. Or, maybe they're willing to put in, 90 minutes a week, let's say. And I'd say, all right, well, I think we can do 15 minutes, like 6 of the days. Right. Right. And let's do that. And I think, and it's saying, and then it's setting expectations for that person and saying, hey, we're going to do this exercise. You might be a little bit sore tomorrow. Here's some proactive things you can do to help to minimize it. I'm just going to be honest with you. The first 2 weeks suck.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be surprised if you're sore for the 2 weeks. But the key is once you get through the 2 weeks, as much as you don't enjoy that, your body likes it even less. So it's going to adapt. As long as we do these things, then you're done with it. And the cool thing is now, this is your motivation to not stop. Because if you ever stop, then you got to go through this again.
Start all over again. That's
So,
for sure.
but I think the biggest thing is setting the expectation and then just giving them little bite-sized ways. Even when there's a lot of times you'll get newbies that are like, I'm ready to go. Give me 7 days a week, and you're like, no, we're not going to do that. Well, we'll work up to that. Like if you can do 3 days this week, then we'll add a day, right? And you kind of like gamify it a little bit. And there's ways to do that. That we as they progress to levels, we'll take strokes off their fitness score, and like we'll kind of gamify it a little bit for them. We have rewards that they can unlock as they're working with us. And so I think that's how we handle somebody who's kind of brand new to it. It's similar. And it's psychology. Same thing you do in physical therapy. Don't ever give anybody more than 3 exercises in the first time or any time. If you give more than 3, they're not going to do any. So like, little chunks, right? The amateur who maybe like also like starts getting really into it and it's like wants to super gung ho. I treat those mentalities like you see, your C-suites, your high performing like engineers or doctors or, your entrepreneurs, like those kind of successful adults. They're honestly mentally not really that different from your Division 1 plus golfers. They've just been exercising it in their profession, and now you still have those same physical traits. Like you can't isolate that out from what they do at work to
That's
to the
their
golf course.
how they're wired.
Yeah, and so it's same idea. It's kind of, hey, this is where we're at. Honestly, I think they're easier than the golfer, because a lot of times they're more oriented around understanding data, and they're older too. Their brains are more formed, generally speaking, than the 20-year-olds coming out of college. And so showing them, hey, this is where you're at. This is where I expect us to get to. These are the steps that we're going to take to get there. And I think if you lay out a clear plan, like this is step 1, this is step 2, then they're kind of like, okay, well then let's go. How quick can we do it? And you're like, well, let's go. We'll see how fast you can go. So it's very similar, I'd say, to how we kind of work with like a tour level pro, or like rehabbing Kyle Berkshire from his injury back to his 3rd world championship. That was probably the biggest test of that, because he would come in for 2 hours a day, and then he would do another 4 hours a day. And I mean, I literally was like he wanted to test his swing like every 3 days. And I'm like, no, every time you test, you're going to set us back. And of course, the first time he does it, and he calls me, like, I told you, don't do that. So like, we're trying to basically get all the clubs out of his reach that we possibly can. But it's truly what makes these guys great is also one of the biggest challenges, from a rehab.
How do you work around that? But that's why I learned. I had one girl, the junior, she was very good years ago, but she wouldn't listen because she was so good that she didn't have to listen before she got to me. And I'm not saying I was X amount greater, but her teachers and coaches at the golf level were like volunteer dads, that type stuff. She was just, she could watch something and pick it up. But I when she was in high school and she She had no dorsiflexion, and she came to me one day. She got her knees all taped. I said, "What's wrong with your knees?" Well, they trained her at school, told me to do squats. I said, "You can't bend your ankles. You're not supposed to do squats." Well, I was doing this. I said, "Okay, what is your dream?" And she wanted to play at where the hell was it? What university? I can't remember. Big time golf, big Division 1 for the girls. And I said, if you continue to do that, your dreams are done. You're never going to get there because look at you. You can't even walk, and you're 16, 17 years old. You should be walking all day long, and you're complaining how much you hurt. So it was, it's getting those driven people to understand. I learned to figure out what they wanted most when I started with them, so that I could always remind. I knew what to go to when they got stubborn because again, they're usually doing things that people tell them they can't, and they're going to prove them wrong
Yeah. Well, that's the
because they
same thing
have
we
to.
do. Same thing we do with the amateurs too. Right? We call it getting the deep motivator. Like,
Hmm.
why are you even here? Like, what is the dream? And all great coaches, I feel like what you're mentioning, you have to do that to kind of continually kind of like get them back in the guardrails.
Yes. um I was listening to Pavel Satsulin on, he was on Huberman, I think it was like 3 or 4 hours a month or so ago, and he mentioned some things that I always would see. I just didn't know how to explain them, and I used to call it farmer strong, like and because farmers and the guys I knew who grew up on farms were working all the time, and I used to think that it was they're doing work and then they're going back the next day, so they're not burning themselves out. And then a couple of buddies said, "No, our dad used to work us to death, and we just had to get out of bed or he'd beat our ass the next day." So, but doing things consistently every day, every day, every day, and it's just getting incrementally better over the long term instead of doing a lot. The mindset to most people, I think, is that they're trying to do a lot all at once, and then they're frying themselves out, their androgen system, their hormonal system, and everything, and now they have to take time off, or if they push harder, they're going to eventually hit a wall. Do you see that continually, and did you use the same tactics to educate these athletes that you're working with on how to navigate that? Like, you better pull back, or we're going to keep running this wall, and your performance is going to go down. Like, your weight training is going to go down, your distance and speed are going to go down, your scores are going to go up. Everything that you want is going to go in the reverse order.
Yeah, I think, and I'm sure you've seen this too. You do your best to lay that out for them. We try to do data visualization for everybody. I think I think there's kind of two. I'll take two tracks. One will be the elite, Division 1 plus, playing professional, trying to play professionally on tour, whatever. Um, I truly majority. There are some who get it. The majority of them just have. You can give them all the education, and then it's really just understanding they're gonna screw it up, and you're just trying to minimize so that when they do screw it up, it's a truly just a learning experience and not career ending.
Yeah.
um, because there will be. I mean, I will say on the tour, particularly like the guys that end up having to go and play like every single week because they're trying to like they they get a top they Monday queue in and then they qualify to play the next week because of how they finished. So then they got to play the next week. Now they have conditional stat, like,
Hmm.
or the guys that are just playing every single, like, those guys are just in a point in their career where they've got to do it, right? So
Yeah,
you're
they have no
literally just
choice.
trying, yeah, and you're just trying to explain, hey, we're just literally duct taping all that we possibly can. This, do you feel how you feel right now? This can be avoided once you're good, like career wise. Like,
Yeah, well,
if we
once you
do
can
this the
set
right
your
way.
schedule in December for the next
Yes.
year,
Yeah.
then we can change.
Yeah, so I feel like that's just part, particularly when you're dealing with the younger, like coming like college into their early 20s. They still think they're invincible, no matter what you tell them, and there's a just part of human nature where like this need to experience it ourselves until we will actually believe it.
Hmm.
Um, but you do the best that you can, and so I'd say maybe 50-50 get it. The other half, you
Yeah,
just try
well,
to manage it.
I had one student that he was slight of build when he was in high school, and as he got into junior, senior year, he started to fill out, and then obviously by college he started to fill out more because now he's at a weight training program. He's at a big Division 1 school, and then he got into creatine,
Mm.
and then he was bragging how much longer he's hitting the ball, and I didn't say a word because I wanted to make sure that this stung when he got it. So he goes to the next tournament and he's airmailing all the greens. I said, "Didn't I tell you to get off the creatine?" And he said, "How did you know?" I said,
That's funny.
"Because I made that mistake. I'm a lot older than you.
Yeah.
I remember getting on back when you used to have to load creatine monohydrate. You remember, you said so much in a gallon, and then you
Mm-hmm.
taper it down
Oh yeah.
over
Yep.
2 weeks. Now the stuff's so good, you just dump 10 grams in, and you're good. But back then, and I went through the same thing. I watched my distance go up and up and up, and pretty soon I'm airmailing every green, picking up 3 yards a week on an iron. And I'm like, I got to a point like this is great, but it's not good for
Yeah.
the scores and cuts made and checking
Yeah.
accounts.
Well, I think you got to let those guys kind of have to learn it themselves, and you just try to put it in a controlled environment. That's a great example.
Mm-hmm.
The amateur, the other bucket would be the 40, 50, 60-year-old guy, whatever, that comes to us and they, they're all, I want to play the game for as long as possible. Like, I'm in pain, right? And so you're like, yeah, all right, cool. So let's get through. And then, in the first year that we work with guys on, we guarantee everything we do. And on average, we see like a 20-yard gain for guys. Their mobility is pretty much all good. Pain's generally gone, way earlier than the year. But so they get to the end of the year, and then, or maybe they get to a point like this time of year, right? Or they'll get like June, and they're like, oh, I got some golf trips coming up. I'll be back in like 3-6 months. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, what are you going to do? Oh, I'm good now. I'm good. They're like, oh, I did, like, and you're like, dude, do you remember? Like, we'll go back. Sometimes we'll like play the initial call, and you're like, you said, I want to play till I'm 90. You've worked out for 12 months. What about the next 40 years? like we're good, dude, but it doesn't last for 40 years. Like, you got to,
Gonna stay.
yeah, right. And so I think there's this like block that people have of like, when all of a sudden they feel good, they forget that, like, oh, I got to still keep this up. And then the understanding of changing, an in-season program, you're playing a ton more, so you're not going to be in the gym nearly as much. You're really just trying to just keep the power outputs, keep the mobility where it is, stay healthy, so that you don't really lose during the season. Maybe you gain a little bit, and then you come to the off season, you can spend more time. And so for a lot of guys in their 40s, 50s, like, that's a new idea of periodizing their training. And they think like, oh, I'm in season, I stop, I don't need to go to the gym. You're in season, you may not go to the gym as much, but we still need to maintain everything that you just worked so hard for so that it continues. So it's funny. It's kind of the same. It's the same issue, but in different presentations, which is I find it very interesting.
See, I used to get, because it gets so hot down here in the summer, that I had training logs going back for 20 years. I could see the dates, what I was doing, everything, and I could almost circle the date. It was usually late May to early June when the heat really started kicking in, and then sometime around early October when the heat dissipated, that my uh, either reps or sets would drop 15, 20, almost 30% by July and August. It was so hot. And then it would kick way back up in October, just make this massive jump in October once the heat was gone. Cause I couldn't, you're hitting balls for multiple hours, chipping and putting, all that stuff. You're out in the heat, and it's 94 degrees and 90% humidity in our area. And it just beats the living hell out of you. And I don't care if you work out in the morning and then go to the course, you're not going to be there as long. And if you go to the course most of the day and try to go to the gym at night, you're just gassed. And that just could, plus, for myself personally, I'm highly allergic to Bermuda grass. Go figure that, when a guy lives in the Southeast, allergic to Bermuda grass, and he's a golfer. So it just, I had this issue, and I had this exponential factor that just made it that much worse.
Yeah.
And I used to sit there, and for years I tried to push through, and you just got to grind it out. And finally it dawned on me, I'm looking at these things, I'm like, something's happening. And I'm like, wait a second. Every year, this time I fall off, and every year this time I jump back up. It I'm 53 this year, and it's just the life experience and the seasoning, but the price you have to pay to get that experience and seasoning is
Yeah.
sometimes very expensive.
Well, and it's what's interesting too is we, shockingly, we track the data on this, and like, people don't realize, like, if you take like the season off, right, you don't do anything, you just play, the average person's going to lose about 3% from a club head speed perspective. So if you're swinging 100 miles an hour, that's 10 yards. So that's 3 miles an hour, right? And if you continue doing it, the average person actually gains 0.5%, which is interesting because if you think about it from a training perspective, we were talking about the strength training and the speed training. Swinging a golf club is the most specific form of of like neurological fast training.
Yeah.
And so you're playing a lot of golf. You're doing a lot of that more than you were in the off season. So now if you can just maintain the force output net, you're going to actually gain a little bit. I think that's a thing that a lot of people don't realize. It's about a 10-yard difference if you stop doing the right stuff, if not even a little bit more. Um, and to your point, the summer, we're in North Carolina, and I mean, some of
Yeah,
those
you guys
summer
aren't
days are,
exactly cold.
yeah, no, not exactly, right? And so, I mean, yeah, I mean, you try to go work out in the morning, and then you try to go play in it, like, especially, if you're playing amateur stuff, you got to walk. If
Mm-hmm.
you're playing 36 holes, like it's not it's a matter of working out, using your workouts and your fitness to help you recover and be and like maintain, as opposed to you're not trying to crush your body in the workouts. And I think that's a very different idea. I think people think I'm going to go work out. They think I'm going to lift weights. I'm going to get sweaty. I'm going to be tired when I leave. A lot of those the strength work that you see, like JT doing the airplanes, or like the workouts that you see guys do before they go play on tour, those aren't strength workouts. Those are
Yeah,
like
just getting the blood and everything
just getting the
flowing.
blood moving, making sure that the motor units are ready to be recruited and move. They're not trying to exhaust themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people kind of miss that. I think through a lot of the whether it's full swing or the videos that get posted otherwise. But I think it's an important thing to note and for people to realize.
I went through that trial and error too unsuccessfully, where I would have, if I did a let's say a heavy workout or pushed it hard in the gym in the morning, I would play great that afternoon because the body's so strong and your nervous system's so fired up.
Yeah,
But the next 2 days, no, it was gone.
destroyed.
It
Yeah.
was destroyed. I'm like, because I thought, well, I'll just go do a different workout or I'll do some cardio and I'll be ready to go at it again. It's going to be great. Nope. Okay, maybe one more day rest. Let me push it a little hard. Nope. I was
Well,
fried.
I think a lot of people, yeah, you got to figure everybody's different. So everyone has different like levels that they can take. And then there's also the nutritional element, the hydration, like there's so many other factors that go into, and that's what they don't, they're starting to, I think people are becoming a little more aware through like a full swing or those sorts of, where you start to
Mm-hmm.
see a little behind the scenes of how much recovery and those things that they have. But I said this morning, I was down at the One Stop Power Shop where all the long drive guys train. And Bobby down there he's got a 6-bedroom place where they can stay when they come and train. And one of the rooms is totally dedicated to, it's got massage chairs, red light therapy. It's just a massive recovery room. Because those guys go and they train like 2-3 hours in the morning, hard as they can, speed work,
Mm-hmm.
and then they go back and do it again. So they're doing two a
They
days.
need to calm it down, the body.
Yeah, so it's literally any time in between that, they're just making sure that they're getting their macros, they're recovering, they're sleeping, they're doing the recovery, the tissue work. I mean, there's all the soft tissue tools you can think of in there, and people don't realize the level of like body care that's necessary. I think, particularly as you get into your 50s plus.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the ice bath for me has been a savior as far
Yeah,
as post round. When I got back to playing, I was off for about 3 years. I didn't touch a club with the injuries I had, and then had cancer. And when I did come back, I went and played with some buddies in Savannah, and we walked, which was pretty stupid considering I had a local one day the pro am the next day. And I got home, I
jeez,
told my girlfriend, I said, I can't play tomorrow. There's no way. I'm sore as hell. So you better get in that ice bath now. And I did. And the next day it was like magic. It was
yeah,
like I
good
didn't
to
even
go.
play. So I was good. I mean, I know it's getting a bad rap recently with getting in post. If you're working out, you're in the gym, you don't want to knock down your inflammation response, because that's actually what helps rebuild the tissue. But I know for things like tennis or golf that are, don't get mad at me, but we'll say they're endurance sports simply because they're over the course of days. I'll just use it that in that definition. But
There's a level of you could get around and say there's a high level of aerobic
yes,
capacity necessary for recovery.
so when it's multi-day, like if you're on a golf trip with some friends or you're going whatever, you're going to play in a member guest, getting in, you're not looking for muscle development at that point. You need the recovery so you can play over the extended period of time
And
you
you're
want to play.
looking, yeah, and the ice bath is huge for nervous system recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Right. To your point, from a tissue standpoint, not necessarily ideal, but yeah, but if you're playing sports, getting in there can kind of help to reset stuff and help you feel a little bit better. And yeah, I mean, look, there's everything's in cycles, right? I'm sure the newest e-stim thing will come out again at some point in the next 3 years, right? Then the ice baths kind of go away, and then they kind of cycle. Everything has a use. It's just a matter of using it at the right time with the right person in the right way, and for the right thing.
Yeah. What are you using it for? What's the context? What's the benefit versus the negative effect and which one do you need for now? To
Exactly. That's like when someone's like, "Hey, what do you think about Pilates for golf?" I'm like, "It's fine." I'm like, well, "What do you think about strength training?" It's fine. What do you think about mobility? It's fine. It's all fine. Like it's all good. Like none of it's inherently bad. If you only do Pilates or you only do yoga or you only do strength training or you only do mobility, you're gonna be missing something. Like you're not gonna get everything that you could possibly get. That's one of my favorite questions I always get whenever I'm speaking somewhere. They're like, "I do yoga. What do you think about that?" I'm just like, "Yes," and whatever the next question is gonna be.
You know what I've learned is in working with some doctors and some therapists and trainers and all these people, the higher level they are, their answer has, I've noticed the common denominator is it depends. And it used to
Hmm.
irritate the shit out of me because I wanted an
Yeah.
answer. And as I gone through the experience of and years of working with them or learning from them or whatever it is, talking to them, it's like, yeah, well, you just can't. They know so much, they just can't give you this answer and it's going to work. It's like it depends on your situation,
Well, I think
what your body's in, what you're doing at that time, what you need it for, et cetera, et
exactly.
cetera.
Yeah, and I think if you ask somebody a question, like if obviously we're talking about golf and fitness, if you ask someone, "Hey, like, what do you think of my swing?" or "Hey, what do you think of my workout?" If if the response is not, "Well, what's your goal?" or "What are you trying to do?" It's not if the response is not in some way an attempt to gather more information, and instead it is, "You're coming over the top. You need to do this," or "Oh, your workout's dumb. You're missing this, this, and this." And that. Like
Mm-hmm.
if that's the first response, run the other way. You're looking for the person who says, "Well, I need some more information." Like, what are you thinking? What do you think you're doing? What are you trying to do? What like if we use the golf swing for an example, and somebody doesn't, I don't know, let's say they're like, early extending their hips, right? So they're pushing their hips into the hand space through the down through impact, right? The first question is like, well, are you trying to do that? Is that like, what's your intent? And they're like, well, I'm trying to keep my hips back. I'm like, okay, why? What are you trying to do? And then, let's say you get to the point where it's like, okay, they really want to accomplish that. Okay, well, let's see if you're physically able to accomplish that. Let's look
Mm-hmm.
at your hip rotation on your lead side. Let's look, right? And then if they are not, well, then, okay, well, then I think we probably need to address your physical element. Well, maybe their physical checks all out and they just are a I call them a movement moron. They just don't know how to move, right? Maybe they just don't know what it feels like to move correctly, right? They need the coach to help them, right? And I think that's where a lot of people, particularly on social, kind of go wrong is they see something and they just jump to try to like show how
Yeah,
smart they
implement
are.
it.
And I think what you're describing is somebody who truly understands everything. They're going to go, well, let's find out a little bit more. That's why we always start with the home assessment with everybody because it's like, well, like before I tell you what you should do, like let's see what it is that you need and what your goal is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I could tell you everything you need, but if your goal is just to get to the 18th hole, so you can get to the 19th hole, have a couple of beers, and you don't care how you played or how you feel tomorrow, and you no desire at all to make your body better, then this is kind of a waste of your time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, I went to see Brian Carroll, about a year ago, who's one of Stu McGill's proteges, and it was interesting that their assessment was. I mean, they say it's 2 to 3 hours, but it literally we sat in Brian's living room for pretty much 2 hours just to find out. And I think he was just knowing and following, reading their material. I think he might have been a little bit surprised that I actually had the levels that I wanted to get to. And like, here's the plan where I'd like to go. Now, I don't know if I can get there. But that's what I'm here for. But that was very interesting to, they're going extremely thorough on, because my body's pretty banged up, and kind of to one of the questions that I mentioned early on is we've talked a lot about what you're going to do with somebody, they can do squats, but do them partially, maybe do deadlifts if they don't need full range of motion. That's as well too. And getting to 1.75 and all the different numbers you mentioned. How does that differ, or take us through your programming for somebody who, let's say, has a herniated disc, or that they have an instability in their spine? Obviously, you're going to make adjustments for that. What do you guys? Uh, and that's kind of an extremely open-ended, broad question because you don't know the specifics. But I'll let you use the example, since I'm sure you've had people come in either with herniations or hip replacement, knee replacement, since those are so prevalent. especially in the Carolinas where we, a lot of people are retired and they retire to our states and they're playing golf and they come to you and they want to play at a member guest. They want to go to that dream trip to Scotland or Ireland. So how do you work with people who have had surgeries and or are damaged?
Well, Pete, it depends.
I know that's a very broad question,
uh,
and that's a perfect answer.
so I guess the simple frame I would give to this is because the principle doesn't depend. I think the specifics of the tactical implementation is where a lot of the it depends comes in. But the principal approach is I always, if you remember the old food pyramid, right, where you had like carbs on the bottom, breads on the bottom, everything. So we kind of stole that, and instead we put at the bottom mobility, right? So that's kind of the foundation, right? Because ultimately, any surgical intervention or injury, you're always going to look, particularly mobility above and below that joint. Because your first question is, well, why did that happen in the first place? So if you have a disc herniation, I want to know, well, why did that happen? Was there a movement pattern or a stressor mechanically going on that really kind of stressed that area, and that was the breaking point? So if I'm going to look at your thoracic spine. I'm going to go another level up in this golf swing. I'm going to look at your shoulders, and I'm going to look at your hip rotations, and I'm going to say, all right, well, let's see what all of those are, and identify. Obviously, if you're back swinging already, let me see your golf swing because I want to see how that stresses. There's one thing between like mobility actively and passively that we can test joint by joint, but then I also like if you are able to swing and you've been swinging, let's say, and like, well, then what does it look like in your golf swing? Like, do you actually use any of that mobility in your golf swing or not? Right? Because just because you have it doesn't mean you use it. But that's from a principle, like a first principle level. That is where we start. Then we look and we say, all right, well, what are your strength levels? How strong are you? Right. So I want to know, are you able to support the movement that you're trying to do? Because the physical requirements of the golf swing are the same if you have a total knee, if you have a total hip, if you have a rotator cuff repair, if you have a herniated disc, whatever it may be. The requirements of the golf swing don't change. Like that club needs to hit the golf ball and it needs to move at a velocity that is enjoyable for you to play or competitive if you're playing at a competitive level. So I need to know, well, what are our strength levels and what are we able to actually support? And, was the lack of strength or too much strength or an imbalance of strength something that potentially led to that injury? Or if there is an imbalance, particularly we'll see this like post knee replacement or hip replacement, where that's obviously unilateral. So one side has had the ground reaction forces are going to be way different on that. Definitely. Not just it's the interesting thing that most people think it's because he got his knee replaced that he doesn't push as hard off that leg anymore. It's actually because he was in pain for the last 3 years. He developed a bad habit because every time he pushed,
bad motor pattern.
Yeah, he was conditioned that if I push, it hurts, so don't push. So, like mechanically, the knee's fine now, so there should be no reason. But now you have a bad movement pattern. You've got the mental block that you got to get over, right? So that's kind of the mobility and then the strength. The next level that we would then look at, and obviously if we hit massive roadblocks in either of these, like I don't even care about the next levels yet, right? But then I would look at like
at a time.
Exactly. One mountain at a time. Then we would look at, well, what are your power abilities, like your power outputs, right? So, okay, we know how strong you are. Well, let's see, are you actually able to generate power? So, in a back injury, or like a total knee replacement, a vertical leap, probably going to be pretty poor, right? And that's going to be because, they're a little afraid to jump. They haven't jumped out the musculature. It may not even be appropriate to do a test jump, right? Because they don't have the muscularity around the quad and the calf to actually support.
Yeah, the brain's probably not going to let them do it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, and then ultimately, let's say you go through all of those, then you're ultimately looking at what we call I call the core four. So from an efficiency standpoint, we look at basically is there weight shift first? Do the hips initiate? So weight shift, hips first. Then is there X factor stretch? So basically, are they able to keep the hips moving and actually use some of the elasticity of the upper body staying behind a little bit? And then do we see speed out front, right? And so those are kind of the big four that we look at. I'd say as close to technique as you get, but more we're looking at it from an efficiency standpoint of kinematically, are these things occurring? If they're not occurring, is it because their kinetics and how they use the ground is incorrect? Is it because there's mobility deficits, whatever it may be. And then ultimately, if that person says, hey, you've got great mobility, your strength is all, we'll use the herniated disc, right? All your mobility is great. All your strength numbers are very much in alignment with how fast you're currently swinging the golf club. Like you're within 10 percentile points of club head speed and strength power numbers. So there's no concern on how powerful or how strong you are. And we see that there's the core four is generally good. But we look at your swing and there's massive side, like maybe there's something technically that you're doing in your swing that's just a bad habit, and this is where we work a lot of times with the golf pro, right? And we'll say, hey, physically, the engine's okay, but the problems are coming because of the technique of whatever, X is happening in the golf swing, and that's what's putting a lot of stress there. How can you help and still get what you need through impact and those sorts of metrics, ball data, because that's ultimately what they're here for, to play the game. How can you, and that's where then we work a lot with those people. So that principle, that the principle of how we approach whatever it is doesn't change. The specifics of the knee replacement versus a hip replacement, a lead leg versus a trail leg, like those are going to be nuanced in terms of the types of drills that you potentially have to look at. A herniated disc that versus a fusion versus and what levels is it at? There's just so many different variations, but from a principle level, that is how you want to think about getting back to golf, or looking at if you're injured, how do I get back to playing? Elbow issues, all of that. Most elbow issues come from bad hip mobility, and you're trying to overuse the arm flipping or whatever it may be to make up for the lack of rotation.
It's taking the brunt force of the eccentric, the hips not doing it. That's going to resonate somewhere,
Yeah.
and then
especially if they're good athletes, you're going to make up for it somewhere.
Yeah, you compound the vibration of the shaft. That's whether they're using graphite or not. There's still going to be forces as the club hits the ground, and the vibration of the shaft, and that's going into usually the lead wrist or the lead elbow. It's going to hit somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I think it was my first true eye-opening moment of how hard it is dealing with a very athletic person. I was helping Carl Pedersen. I was rehabbing Carl Pedersen this a number of years ago. He was still playing. And he comes in and so we're doing like some movements, exercise. And so he does that exercise, he cheats. So I'm like, all right, dude, so just don't do that. So I'm like, literally, Pete, I'm literally have my hands on him, blocking him so he can't cheat. He cheats from like some joint that I've never seen anybody be able to cheat from. So now I think of like Twister, right? So I've got like one hand here. Now I'm trying to block this one. I'm like, all right, now go. He cheats again with a third. So now I'm like trying to pull up a knee. And so I think you see this all the time in professionals, but you also see it in just good amateurs, like people who are good athletes growing up and they're playing game. The better the athlete, the more cheats you have. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that sometimes is hard for people to, like, the thing that makes you really good athletically, you can see something or figure it out or manipulate it, sometimes actually works against you when it comes to longevity and injury. And so I think I joke with people who are not great athletes. I say, hey, so bad news, all your tests stink. The good news is you're not going to be able to cheat your way around this, so it'll be real easy to fix.
That's interesting how you say that, because when Doc McGill was in town, after we did the episode, we were sitting around talking, and he said, well, if you have a disc of your MRI, bring it over tomorrow and I'll take a look at it. So we did. And during the show, we were talking about just the luck of the draw, your DNA, that you get either wide facet joints or you get narrow facet joints. He's obviously with wide, you can make a big a turn as you want to, and it's uninhibited and it's great. And you look like John Daly, or one of these guys that can just rear back and let rip. And so he looks, he goes, well, you got good news and bad news. He goes, you're not bad, but you're not the best. And you did play at a high level. So he goes, get up, let me test your hips. And he goes, oh boy. So my hips were like really, he goes, that's why you got to the level you did. Your back didn't move as good as we wanted it to, but your hips are like, wow. So yeah, to your point, and I never really worked on hip mobility or anything. I just figured out a way that I got to get the club back here. And if I do it like this, it's uncomfortable. So let me piece it together and sort it out.
Yeah, when the hips are the same as the facets. Some people will have real shallow hip capsules. Mm-hmm. Some will have real steep, or real like deep ones. And to your point, most people have no idea. They just figure it out.
Yes,
it's pretty interesting.
And it's I think it's when they go to somebody who's going to try to fit them to a mold. You have to turn this much, or you have to do this, and I want you to do it this way and not that way. I think that's where they can get into trouble. That's where when I used to teach at the Golfers College, I said you got to be very careful on what theory you're applying, because if it doesn't work for that individual, you're doing something that's contradictory to what their body allows them to do, then you could end up hurting them, and now your reputation's on the line. Much less what you're going to be miserable because you just hurt somebody.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm just such a fan of just always going to first principles. Like go
Yes,
to the deepest of
it's
deep
a good
level.
one. It's a
And,
good one,
and
folks.
let's operate off of principles. And like whether you're working with John Daly or 95-year-old Bill, the principles don't change. Like the hips need to rotate, the shoulders need to rotate now, and we can figure out physically what you're able to do, and that is going to dictate to us how far you can go and how fast you can go, and then all the nuance starts to come in. But the principles are you need to have the ability to rotate. You need to be strong enough to support whatever rotation and speed that you're trying to do. Your power ability needs to be able to support that as well. And then, you need to be able to do that in an efficient manner in order to do it to decrease, to optimize your output and decrease your chance of injury. And I think if you can operate under that purview, it becomes relatively applicable to lots of things, right? And I think the same thing instruction. It's the same thing with anything in the golf space. And then it's just, I think, unfortunately, we argue a lot about nuance
Mm-hmm.
when in reality, it's kind of like, I always think of like religion. Generally, every religion says be a good person, treat people good, right? Right. Then there's all these nuances,
Pretty
and then
simple.
then people go to war, and right. But it's kind of like the same thing here. Like the principles are the same. Like you got to rotate, you got to be strong enough to do it, you got to be powerful enough to support what you're trying to do. But obviously, there's lots of different ways that you can do it. So
I wanted to ask you about rep ranges and calculating weights and stuff, because again, that was a thing I heard in the Pavel Huberman episode, and it was very interesting that the Russian literature that he had. So he said if you're going to work with body weight, let's take push-ups because they're a very simple one that everyone can understand. You do as many push-ups as you possibly can, and then when you go to train, you do half that amount. And then you're going to do it, do your 3 reps, or I'm sorry, 3 sets, because the goal is not to be sore when you're done. As you already mentioned, you want to be able to come back a couple of days later and do it again. So you're getting, let's say, 5% stronger over the course of 3 months. You're not hurting yourself, which is the big thing. Again, we're going back to rule number one. Don't hurt other people. Is also don't hurt
yes,
yourself. But even if you're weight training, it's, take your 1 rep max and take 75 to 85% of your 1 rep max and do 3 sets of 5, or if you got the time, do 5 sets of 5, no more than 3 exercises. And again, you're okay. Well, I can do more. Yeah, we know that, but we're looking at the big picture of the entire year, not just what you can do for the next 6 weeks until you fry yourself out or you can't even get off the toilet. And I'm guilty of that for you. And again, I'm my 5th decade, and for years, I always thought if you're not super sore, then you're not doing enough. And here I was trying to play professionally, and I'm probably fried half myself out half the time, and then wondered why at the end of the season I'm barely able to get through a tournament.
yeah, yeah.
So how do you guys go about your rep range, or your reps and set ranges and counts?
Yeah, I think I always think of it. I don't know, people listening can't see, but I have like a little cup here, right? And I would think of that like I can put so many marbles in my cup,
Mm-hmm.
and if I golf, that takes marbles out of my cup. If I work out, that takes marbles out of my cup. And for in the gym, the more reps you do takes more marbles, right? So if you're not playing a lot of golf, and I think of it this way: my goal in the off season is to try to make the cup as big as possible. So to try to take a little 6-ounce cup and turn it into a big gulp cup, right? Because the bigger the cup is going into the season, the more marbles I have. So therefore, the more that my body or my athlete's going to be able to take throughout the season, and then when I get to September, October, November, hopefully I'm not duct taping them together because there's still marbles in the jar, right? So think of when you work out or when you play golf, when you practice, takes marbles out. When you sleep, you do recovery, you do tissue work, you do recovery-based exercise. It puts marbles back in the jar. So the step one in the off season generally is to try to make the cup or the jar as big as possible. And so that's typically from a rep range. That's generally like adding mass, right? So you're from a rep range standpoint, you're doing, definitely probably more than 8 reps in a set, maybe 10, 12, 15, depending on where you're at from a hypertrophy standpoint. But then once generally once you get into, if we use, let's use the Masters as like the start of the season. So generally then you work backwards from there. So a month or two before the Masters, you want to be kind of as explosive as possible. You're really kind of max strength and everything out. Prior to that, you're really trying to get as big as you can. Trying to build
like a bear before hibernation.
Exactly. So then, as you're getting to the 2 months leading up to this, to the Masters or to the season, you're probably dropping where you're doing, sets of 5, probably, 5, maybe 8 in the early parts of there. But the general recommendation that I'm always giving to people, because especially golfers are not fitness people. This is fine. I started a golf fitness business, and then it took me about 8 years, and I realized I'm not selling fitness, and all my clients hate fitness. What I'm actually selling is helping people play the game of golf longer, right? So, and that's where it really hit home for me. It's like my job is to tell people the least amount of working out they can do to have the best result on the golf course. And so that's where even with, people generally don't know their 1 rep max, even when we test guys. And this is the other, you get to the risk reward. I'm not testing 1 rep maxes on 55, 65-year-olds.
Right.
We work 85, 95, 90% of the people we work with are remote. We have coaches all over the world.
Pop, and then they're done.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So what we're, at most we're doing like a 3 rep, like, hey, do 3. When you feel like you maybe got 1 more, call it good. Right. So like that way we'll get an approximation, but we're staying safe. And so generally what we're saying, if we're going to tend to use more what's called reps in reserve, where we'll say, hey, the goal is 3 sets or 4 sets of 5. Generally we anticipate you to be around this weight. But as you know, if your nervous system's fried and you're supposed to normally do 200 pounds, 180 pounds may be your 200 today, right? And this goes back to velocity-based training, where you can actually tell that in real time. But so that's where we'll say, hey, your goal is 200 pounds today. If you've slept like crap or whatever, you can lower it. But the goal generally is when you hit the 5th rep, you've got maybe 2 left in the tank, like good reps, right? And then I think when you get into like in season now with our guys, we're 3 sets of 3, right? And now you're going high intensity. So the load is, let's say your max is 100 pounds. Let's say your max on a lift is 100 pounds. In the off season, when you're trying to build a lot of mass, you're probably lifting 60 to 70, 75 pounds. When you're in the lead up to the Masters, you're probably 70 to 90 ish pounds. Mm-hmm. Right. And then when you're in the, in season, you're probably going like 90, 90, you're in that like 80, definitely 80+% more than your 1 rep max. And depending on the day, maybe more or less, but you're doing sets of 3 and you got maybe 2 left in the tank. So you feel fresh, because now all of a sudden, whatever that size your cup was 12 weeks ago, it's still the same size, but now you're taking double the marbles out for golf. So you got to take less out in the gym.
Yeah, you don't have the money out of the savings account to
exactly
get marbles in your
right example. But then those exercises that we were talking about earlier with like JT, the airplanes, those are marble back in the jar exercises, right? And I think that's what a lot of people miss is, that's not strength training exercise. That's marble back in the jar exercise. And just trying to do the patterning and help the body to continue to move well. And how can we help it recover? Like low level cardio for like 20 minutes, just from an aerobic recovery standpoint, like, where you can still, the talk test, where you can still kind of talk, or if your mouth is closed, you can still breathe through your nose, but you're like kind of just barely able to. Those are some simple approximations for people. But I think that's the big thing when you're dealing with in season versus off season. To me, that how big is your jar, how big is the cup analogy just tends to hit for people.
So then you're doing, the intensity is more, but it's for much shorter rep range.
Correct. Yeah. So I think that's a lot of things people get wrong, is they think it's the amount of like how heavy the weight is. Actually, fewer reps with heavier weight will make you less sore, if sore at all, than a lot of reps with lighter weight. And also, if we're talking in season, you're trying to be, golf is an explosive power sport. So you're trying to keep the nervous system as primed as possible. So the whole point of going to the gym in season is keeping the nervous system firing, making sure we're recruiting all the muscle fiber units. So lifting heavier weight recruits more muscle fibers, more muscle bundles. It helps you to do that. So that's the goal of those workouts, is to keep the the firing power high as possible without fatiguing it.
Yeah, that's what I think most people don't understand if they haven't either worked with someone like yourself or a Ben Shear, uh, Michael Carroll, Dan Hellman. All you guys have been on the show. I've talked to all you guys at different points in time and extensive. I've worked with Dan for 3 years. Ben, like I said, I bugged the hell out of him. But what I think most people understand is you mentioned the neural circuitry. When somebody, and again, this is not knocking Bryson. I'm a fan of Bryson's, but when somebody's hitting over 1,000 golf balls on the range, it's not that their muscular system so much gets tired; it's that their nervous system gets fried. And when you're talking about playing at the highest level, and this goes for whether you're a world class tour pro at a major, or if you're John Doe at your member guest, even if you had a couple of beers and you're feeling good, to sit out there on the range all afternoon with your buddy and shoot the breeze and hitting hundreds and hundreds of balls, it's not going to do you a lot of good. I know it's addicting because you miss being outside and you miss your friend and you miss being able to hit balls because your life has just gotten in the way of you and having that much fun. But you got to remember what is, if you want to win your tournament or play really well or be in contention, maybe you got to give and take a little bit. It's the nervous system that gets fried. Whether you're weightlifting, training, or hitting golf balls or whatever you're doing,
Yeah,
it's
and I
not
think
so much muscle fatigue.
yeah, I think the important thing is that it's all relative, right? Like
Hmm.
1,000 balls. I mean, I don't know what Bryson's normal capacity is. That may be 50%. I have no idea,
Yeah, exactly.
right? But for somebody else listening, like 20 balls may be the equivalent of 1,000 balls, right? So
Most of the people listening is probably between 20 and 50, and okay, I'm good.
exactly. So it's all relative. I think that's the important piece, right? And that's you see, everyone talks about Rory. If he's deadlifting 315, that may be maybe that's his 50%, maybe that's his 95%. I don't know what his max is, and I think that's you got to do you. And I think for everyone listening, know what your numbers are. Assess your body. Don't guess for your body. Don't transpose what you see somebody else doing on yourself. Focus on the behavior, not necessarily the details. I think that is probably one of the biggest tips for greatness is like, what are the behaviors that the best in the world are doing? Well, they're working out, they're hitting balls, they're like, okay, those are those are the behaviors. Now the specifics need to be tailored to you specifically, but
Yes.
again, you go into the principles of it.
Yeah, I've been in Hilton Head over 30 years, and I've seen the people come on vacation, and hey, you guys have any Advil? You have any Tylenol? Like
Yeah.
we way overdid it, and we only been here for 2 days. I've seen this for decades,
Yeah.
so I'm speaking from a lot of experience on that. When people get here and they overdo it, especially this time, March and April in particular,
Yeah, for
when
sure.
it's warm, because it's warm, it's 70 some degrees. We got the RBC Heritage this week. People are either coming from the Masters Overflow, or they're coming from the Northeast, and it's been shitty spring up there, and they're just itching to get outside, and they do, and they're, oh, this is great. And like I said, they get a couple beers or a couple transfusions or whatever they're drinking,
But
and
yeah, transfusions are magical for an extra 100 balls.
easy. And then the next day it hits you all at once, and it's like, oh
Yep.
shit, what did I just do?
Yep.
Wow, we touched on a lot. Do you have a few minutes we could do emergency 9, just to
Yeah, let's do it. Let's
quick
do it.
one, like a cool down in a workout
Yeah, it's
session?
important. It's important for recovery.
Yes.
We're practicing what we preach, Pete.
All right. Everyone knows that's listening to the show. The first one, the last one we've done on basically every show that we've had. The ones in between we mix in. So the first one, as I mentioned, member guests throughout the show. If you're playing in a member guest and you're in the shootout and they're going to get the crowd all jacked up because you guys are playing, what song are you going to have them play while you walk up to the first tee?
Mr. Bombastic, Shaggy.
Oh, that's a good one. Very good one.
Not even a question on that one.
No. All right. This one I'm curious, as a person in the fitness space. If you could put any restaurant, chain or individual restaurant, in your kitchen, what one are you going to put in there?
Probably go Chipotle.
That's number one.
Yeah.
Ironic as that sounds. All right. Um, would you rather hit every fairway for the rest of your life or never have a 3-putt again?
Never have a 3-putt.
That's like pissing strokes away. I used to hate the 3-putt.
Yeah, no. I'd rather hit it far and in the rough.
Especially with today's technology.
Exactly.
Let's see. The most used app on your phone.
Just use app on my phone.
Always curious to see what people are using today's world.
Probably my if you take away my text messages, It's probably my nutrition app, if I'm honest.
Good. Well,
I'm,
I
I'm
would expect something like that
yeah,
from you.
I'm a nerd. I'm a nerd for understanding how many macros are in different foods. It's a weird thing I have.
Well, it keeps you, in line. As we talk about not getting too far, you don't want to get things too out of whack, and it's a
Yeah,
good
I would
thing
say
to
the
do.
close second would be the Four Ts app to book my tea times.
What what is there a nutrition app or any of them that you're preferential to? Someone
I
can
just,
check them out.
I mean, I just honestly just use MyFitnessPal. I find it the most user friendly. It's easy. You can scan all the food.
Cool. This is always a fun one for my own sake to see what people are using and buying. Your favorite purchase in the last year under $1,000.
Favorite
Can be
purchase.
any. It can be a golf gadget, training gadget, household item, just something that you really love that you under $1,000.
Good one.
Yeah, it's been
I
pretty
don't
cool.
really buy much stuff. I'd have to say probably the probably my putter cover.
Okay. We'll give someone a plug. Who makes it, or is it
I
just
honestly have no idea who makes it, but it says I like big putts and I cannot lie.
someone? Hopefully somebody has that trademarked or
I hope they
copied.
do. My wife told me I had to pick something offline for Christmas, and so that's what I picked.
There you go. This one's a newer one too. It's a kind of fun one. What is worse, a well done steak or iron covers?
There's nothing worse than a well done steak.
I agree. God, it's like eating
Oh,
the
it's
bottom of
terrible.
your leather shoe.
Talk about opportunity cost. It's just
Mm.
like there was such a good opportunity just missed there. You know.
Hmm. Let's see. Hollywood calls you. They said, Chris, we watched your career from the time you got out of school. We want to make a movie about your life, and we're going to let you, or maybe better, we're going to let your wife cast the star that plays you. Who are y'all going to pick to play Chris in your
Who does
biopic?
she pick? She probably picks Mark Wahlberg. That'd be my guess.
Good one. That's a very good one. The number one is probably Matt Damon.
Damn
There's
it.
no
Yeah.
question.
I mean, solid choice, but I feel like she would go Wahlberg.
Okay. Uh, this is always a fun one too. This is a relatively new one. Your go-to condiment at the halfway house on your hot dog.
Catch up.
I'm with you on that one. We've had everything from jalapenos to Chicago style to, I mean, you name it. That's been a fun question. That's been a good
Yeah,
answer.
I mean, in all honesty, the normal go to would just be just take it plain. But if I gotta go condiment, it's ketchup.
Okay. And then the last one, in your opinion, as far as golfers are concerned, who's the GOAT? Who's the greatest of all time?
I mean, hard to beat Tiger.
Yeah. He is in the lead, that's for sure. I would say probably 65-35 over Jack. It's
Over
mostly
Jack.
generational. I've had
I was gonna
nothing
say
but
it's got to be generational. I'd be very curious on that.
yes, anyone probably 50-55 and older has gone heavy Jack, and anyone 50 and under is heavy Tiger. With a few of the older ones going Tiger as well.
Yeah, it's definitely. I don't know. I'm pretty stout on Tiger, especially if he
Yeah,
didn't have all those injuries too. I
no
mean,
kidding.
geez.
You guys got any new things coming out? Books, lectures, speaking anywhere that we can tell everybody about?
I think the biggest thing that we put together actually a gift for anyone that wants to check it out at parforsuccess.com/golf360. We have our home assessment. That's the biggest, I think, exciting thing that we have. And basically, anyone you can go there. We'll send it. It's free, and we give you guys just for listening to the show. You can actually jump on, get a free one-on-one call with one of my team members to kind of walk you through what the results mean. And I think the bonus that we have on there too is being able to tell you how you compare to other golfers your age. So, um, your club head speed, your mobility, your strength, power numbers. That's probably the most exciting thing right now. We're
Very
just
cool.
we're just doubling down on all the research. We just continue to iterate on that. The new version just came out, so that's why that's probably the most exciting one for us, for everybody listening.
Very well, and we'll put a special link to that one in your summary on the show. So everybody, whether you're on Spotify, Apple, the website, YouTube, we'll put the video on this on YouTube. That'll be in there. You can get in one click. Chris, has been fun. I've learned a
It's been a
lot.
blast, man.
Very. We covered a lot. Hopefully, we didn't cover too much that we bored some of the people who aren't fitness nerds. But I think golfers in general are nerds and love information, especially in today's world. And the more we can give them, the better. Hopefully, it's going to get somebody at least thinking more about what they do in the gym instead of just going to YouTube and saying, "Oh, geez, I watch Ronnie Coleman do this, so I'm going to go do this, even though I'm a golfer and I'm not trying to squat 800 pounds. But hopefully they reach out to you. He's in North Carolina. You're just northwest of Raleigh, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, yeah, we're right here in Raleigh, and honestly, we have we work with people all over the world, and we even have like 2-3 day events that people fly into us right by the airport in Raleigh. So,
Perfect. And you guys have
yeah,
the online teaching, coaching, and client portal, I guess is the
yeah, we do. We have private one-on-one. We customize everything. Guarantee the 10 yards in the first 3 months and 20 yards in the first year, and we do. Yeah, everything's we're geeks. We love data, and I think my number one kind of plea to everyone always is just whether it's your golf game or your body, like just please assess it. Don't just guess.
yes, assess,
To your
don't
point.
guess.
Yeah.
That's a good one. All right, thank you. Just hang out a few minutes, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again. We'll check you out next time. Let's see.